皆さん、こんにちは。
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the 62nd Convention for Nikkei and Japanese Abroad. Due to the coronavirus pandemic and for the sake of anti-infection protocol, we are holding our convention online again this year, as we did last year. I am Yoshihiro Haramoto of the Association of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad, and I will be serving as the facilitator today. The streaming of this convention has been made possible with the enormous assistance of Kyodai Remittance, including the provision of the equipment. Today, the key language of the proceedings will be Japanese, but simultaneous interpretation is available in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Please click the interpreter button at the bottom of your screen and select your preferred language. And here we have one request. Please do not record or capture any video slides or anything shown on the screen today. A recording of this convention will be made available on the association's YouTube channel later in the various languages. So those who want to relive the convention experience, please access the YouTube channel at a later date. We will now begin the opening ceremony of the 62nd Convention of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad. First, the chairman of the Association of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad, Shinji HIRAI, will make his opening remarks.
Good morning. Buenos dias. Hola. Magandang araw. Minasama, konnichiwa.
Good day to everyone. We are grateful and honored to have the online presence of His Imperial Highness Crown Prince Akishino, as well as Foreign Minister Hayashi, Speaker of House of Representatives, Mr. HOSODA, and the President of House of Councilors, Mr. OTSUJI. And we are very happy that we are able to hold this convention with all your support and cooperation. The Nikkei people around the world have overcome very harsh history and have gained trust in the country where you were accepted, and you are now the bond that unites us together. After this, later on, we will be hearing from Professor Ninomiya from Sao Paulo. He will be giving a keynote speech, and tomorrow we will have forums as part of the convention where we will discuss the role of the Nikkei community towards the future. We are still living under the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the situation is changing bit by bit, and gradually we will be able to travel and visit each other again. We are now seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Just last month at the Japanese American National Museum in Los Angeles, the name list of the Nikkei people who were interned has been released. And also, last month in Sao Paulo, Brazil, 1,400 Nikkei people had a parade and showcased the diverse culture of the Nikkei community. So overcoming hardships, the Nikkei people have been accepted into each country and have gained respect of the local community. So the Nikkei people are the bond and the bridge that unites us together, and we will continue to serve that role. So in that sense, I hope that this year's convention will be a very fruitful one, and ask you for your continued cooperation and understanding. The President of the Association of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad, Mr. Tanaka, will lead the way in order to create an organization that would drive this movement. And therefore, we ask you for your kind support. Finally, I would like to wish for the further prosperity of their Imperial Highness Crown Prince and Princess Akishino and their family, and also wish the health and happiness of all attending today. And with that, I would like to end my remarks. Thank you. Gracias. Obrigado. Salamat. Arigatou gozaimashita.
Thank you, Chairman Hirai. Next,
We would now like to receive an address by Foreign Minister Yoshimasa. Konnichiwa. I'm Yoshimasa, Minister for Foreign Affairs. I would like to express my heartfelt congratulations on holding of the 62nd Convention of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad online today, getting together Nikkei people from all over the world and their supporters. It is quite unfortunate that I'm not able to see you in person due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Yet, on the convention last year, held online for the first time, there were more than 300 registrations from 32 countries, and I heard that a large number of participants joined the conference despite the time difference and exchanged opinions actively, making use of chat functions. This reminds me of the strong ties of the Nikkei Communities, and the government of Japan is really reassured. The Nikkei people, active in various fields around the world, have contributed considerably to the development of each country, earning the trust and respect for Nikkei people and communities. I hope that all Nikkei, including the new generation, will continue to play roles as bridges of friendship between Japan, the country of your heritage, and the countries of your residence. The government of Japan will also continue to make a contribution in building cordial relationships through various people-to-people exchange projects, such as studying abroad, training, and invitation programs. Furthermore, the government of Japan reviewed the border measures for the COVID-19, and the visa exemption arrangements were resumed this month. I hope many people will visit Japan again. I also look forward to hosting the Nikkei and Japanese Abroad in Japan next year. Let me conclude by wishing for the prosperity of the Nikkei communities and all the best of your health.
thank you very much, Minister Hayashi. Next, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mr. Hosoda Hiroyuki, will say a few words. Hello to everyone. I am Hosoda Hiroyuki, the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Today, Nikkei people from all over the world are gathered here online at the 62nd Convention of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad. I welcome this occasion and feel very pleased to have the privilege of extending my greetings to all of you. The more than 3.8 million Nikkei and Japanese migrants around the world are very active in a wide range of fields in their respective countries, including politics, the economy, education, and culture. Through their activities, they have contributed greatly to promote friendship and goodwill between Japan and the countries where they live. I express my deep respect to the achievements of the current and earlier generations of Nikkei and Japanese abroad and their efforts to overcome the difficulties of living in a culture and environment different from those of Japan. Due to the protracted effects of the novel coronavirus, there are people who have already secured jobs or places at Japanese institutions of learning but have not been able to come to Japan yet. However, with advances being made in our scientific knowledge of the infectious disease and the gradual moves to ease or abolish quarantine border control measures, I am convinced that soon there will come the day when we will be able to welcome Nikkei people and many other people to study and work in Japan. I personally am very much looking forward to seeing you in person, hopefully next year. I hope that you will continue to contribute to the development of your countries, and as people who have insight into both countries will play the part of disseminators of Japanese culture and continue to work for the furthering of friendships between your countries and Japan. I conclude by wishing for your continued good health and success, and for the further expansion and development of the Association of Nikkei and Japanese abroad.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hosoda. Next, we would like to have Mr. OTSUJI Hidehisa, the President of the House of Councilors. To the Nikkei people active around the world, good day to you. I am OTSUJI Hidehisa, the President of the House of Councilors. I feel very close to the Nikkei people around the world, especially those who immigrated to Dominica. And I do not want to make this remark too formal. Post-war Japan had a headache of population issue, and that was because of the policy taken during the war to increase combatants and also the following inflow of repatriates after that. There were concerns that maybe people will be overflowing in this small country. And that was why a policy to promote immigration abroad was taken. And this was promoted by painting a very rosy picture. However, an ambassador from abroad sent a telegram saying that we shouldn't tell the harsh conditions of the receiving countries. I believe that some of you may have fought lawsuits against the government. I have posed questions during diet sessions, and the Prime Minister back then, Prime Minister Koizumi, offered an apology. I don't think I need to say further. However, lastly, I would like to say something that is very important. I would like to say that all of you were very special. I understand that some started off right after graduating from medical school. And you all gritted your teeth and persevered, and that's why you were able to build the position that you hold today. The countries that accepted immigrants, I have spoken to officials there, and they all say that they are really happy to have accepted Japanese immigrants because they have contributed greatly to the economic development of our countries. And it's not just that. The Nikkei people have contributed in terms of culture and society. That is what I heard from many government officials. There was a country where a Nikkei president was born. So I would like to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for all the hard work that you have carried out.
Thank you, President Otsuji. Today, we are joined by a total of 31 countries, 611 people, including those in Japan. We have received video messages from representatives of 9 of these countries, which we will start playing shortly. From here onwards, the chat function can be used. At this convention, we are unable to meet face-to-face, but we hope that you will be able to interact through the chat function. Please send in your greetings and messages. And here are the video messages.
Hello, my name is Koji Sato, and I'm the current president of the Japanese American Association of New York. It is my great honor to greet all of you today. The Japanese American Association of New York, or JA, has a 115-year history in the New York area. I was very happy to participate in our Keynote, or senior luncheon yesterday, which we hold once or twice a month, and serve lunch to around 120 seniors who either attend our luncheon or come or have someone come pick up the bento lunches. Our volunteers also deliver bento lunches to those that are unable to attend. I had the pleasure of presenting a bouquet of flowers to one of our seniors celebrating her upcoming 100th birthday. It is because of those that came before us and who paved the way so that we, as Nikkei, are able to live proudly as Nikkeijin. I appreciate all the sacrifices that our predecessors made so that we can live comfortably now. In May of this year, we had the first Japan parade in New York to celebrate the 150 years since the Iwakura mission came to the US and went on to Europe to learn Western culture. Times have changed in the 150 years since the members of that mission came to New York, but what they contributed after they went back to Japan still has a lasting impact on all Japanese and Japanese Americans in New York. Although I have spoken about the importance of the older generation, it is also important to cultivate the younger generation. JA is interested in helping develop the next generation of Nikkeijin in New York. Every May, JA offers scholarships to those students in the area going to US colleges. We also offer scholarships to graduate students that are studying subjects that relate to the United States and Japan. I am impressed every year with the quality of students who receive our scholarships, and I'm always satisfied that there are plenty of qualified people who will eventually be leaders of our community. I would like to end by saying that we must respect our elders. I remember hearing this when I was young, but I'm also at that age where I am saying this to the younger generation. As is also Jay's motto, we must also work to help each other. Thank you for inviting me to this event, and I also hope to see you in New York sometime. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kazuma Kitagaito, and I'm grateful to be able to present this video message.
My parents were born and raised in Japan. They are Issei in the United States, and I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and I am an Issei. I speak Japanese at home and English at school. Every year in the summer with my mother and my brother, we visit Ishikawa Prefecture, which is my mother's hometown, and we stay for 2 months. My grandparents took me to Kenrokuen and also to Kaiten Sushi, which didn't exist in the United States back then. I have a lot of fond memories, and these have become treasures for me. I started kendo from elementary school, and I learned the importance of courtesy. And then I went to Southern California University to study mechanical engineering and started up a Nikkei club. After that, in order to become a dentist, I went to Pennsylvania University. In the East Coast, I found that I was the only Nikkei in the area, and that made me strongly aware that I am a Nikkei. And then to study bioengineering, I also studied in order to gain a master's degree. After graduation, at Washington University, I studied orthodontics, and now in Seattle, I work as a dentist. Seattle is the home to Nintendo US, and there is a large Japanese and Nikkei community here. And I will be proud of being a Nikkei and my Japanese heritage, and I hope to contribute to the community in Seattle.
Thank you again for this opportunity, and I wish all the best to the wonderful Japanese and Nikkei communities around the world.
I have been the co-chair for Hanashi Kata for the past 3 years. Hanashi Kata is a Japanese language and speech program which celebrates and recognizes the excellence of Japanese language in students in Hawaii.
As the future generations continue to evolve and transform, I'm really looking forward to seeing how future UJSH members can bridge the intersections between the Hawaii Japanese community and various nationwide and international Japanese communities. I believe that it's important for the younger generations to understand the diverse array of adversities, achievements, and experiences of other Japanese American communities so we can never lose sight on our past. I would also like to express my sincerest gratitude to the United Japanese Society of Hawaii for providing me with foundational experiences so I can continue to uplift our community on a larger scale.
Over the past few years, UJSH has evolved in our use of technology, and this has helped us to get more of our younger members involved. We now hold board meetings via Zoom and utilize online forms for event registration, as well as platforms like Square to accept credit card payments. We have a YouTube channel that allows us to share and connect with Nikkei around the world. We are also working on launching a new website, www.ujshawaii.org.
Here at the UJSH, we work with our senpais, learn our history, inspire to pass our legacy on to the next generation. Aloha to all Nikkeis from the United Japanese Society of Hawaii.
Aloha.
Aloha!
Aloha!
At the Nikkei National Museum and Cultural Center, we returned to the office on April 25th. Our center has been open to the public with limited access since September 2020, following all public health orders and safety precautions, but only from this spring has life felt somewhat normal again. Our current exhibit, Washi, Connecting Cultures, Countries, and Generations, showcases the contemporary artwork of Canadian artists Naoko Matsubara and Alexa Hatanaka. Our artist opening on September 2nd included live performances by contemporary dancer Shion Sky Carter and DJ Rennie Foster, and was attended by over 100 guests. That same weekend saw the return of our largest cultural event, Nikkei Matsuri, which had over 6,000 visitors each day and made our building and grounds feel alive again. And brand new is a complete refresh of our permanent Taiken exhibit on our second floor, which will be accessible to visitors to our building for the next decade. This year, we commemorate the 80th anniversary of Japanese-Canadian internment with special events that focus on our elders who survived that traumatic time in this country. In late October, we will once again hold our gala dinner to recognize community members and raise funds to help sustain our programs. COVID has not gone away, and while we never stopped serving our community during the pandemic, it's nice to be back, to be able to fulfill our commitment of omotenashi, where we can wholeheartedly welcome and care for our guests. Our faces become familiar to program participants, museum goers, volunteers, and all others on site. We are better able to collaborate and bond with our coworkers, to help share duties or solve issues for those using our facility, and truly experience being part of our diverse community.
I'm from Vancouver, Canada.
Greetings to everyone from the Japanese Canadian Cultural Center. Today we are so fortunate to have a very dear member of our community, Kelly Fleck, to have a conversation with us. Kelly, I know you embarked on a journey to reconnect with your family history and your heritage, which is documented very nicely here as part of our manga series for our permanent exhibit, Maru Immigration Stories. Kelly, can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
I'm a fourth generation Japanese Canadian, and I'm a mixed race Japanese Canadian. So I often heard the question, what are you? Where are you from? So I often felt like my identity was being questioned, and I didn't have all the answers to those questions. This manga sort of captures my experience visiting my ancestral hometown of Mio in Wakayama, Japan. My great-great-grandfather, Bunichi Hamade, came from Mio in 1899 and moved to Steveston in British Columbia. During the Second World War, his boat was confiscated, he lost everything, he was interned in Lemon Creek. After the war, he felt hurt and betrayed by Canada. He decided to return to Japan. So when I went to Mio, I had the chance to see his gravesite, to say a prayer to Bonichi, and I thanked him.
How do you hope to inspire young Nikkei?
My bocce is very dear to me, but Whenever I visit her, she always tells me stories about her past. And so I hope that other young Japanese Canadians and other young people in general think of their own stories, their grandparents, their great-grandparents, and what a beautiful way to honor your family by sharing their stories and making sure they're not forgotten.
Finally, Kelly, apart from being featured as part of our exhibit, you are also a central part of the Japanese Canadian community because you are also the editor of the Japanese Canadian publication Nikkei Voice. Tell us about the role you play.
Yeah, as the editor of Nikkei Voice, in a very tangible way, I can see how I share Japanese Canadian stories. But while this is my role as a journalist and as the editor of Nikkei Voice, I feel like it's also the role or my responsibility as a fourth generation Japanese Canadian.
Thanks so much, Kelly, for making time for us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What is my relationship with the Nikkei community? My relationship, I think, is one of the most intimate and essential relationships I have. Having these two countries within my identity has always made me know myself and really identify myself as a Nikkei. The future prospects for yourself and the Nikkei community? My perspective of my future is to be able to give back to the people and the community who always took care of me, to those who took time to help me. The community has also done a lot for me, so it is the least I could do to be able to give back in some way all that they have offered me. What is the message to the Nikkei of the world? My message to all the Nikkei of the world is that although it can be a little complicated to have two countries, but you don't have to choose one or the other. You don't have to choose to be from one country or the other, and you can simply find this middle point and this perfect point where the two countries meet and where you can have the best of both sides. So you may feel happy and proud to be able to be in the middle of two wonderful countries.
My name is Susanna Oye. I am a Nikkei Sansei from Cuba City. My grandfather was from Niigata City. My name is Manuel Ogata. I am a member of the Cuba Nikkei Management Committee of the Colonies. I am in charge of culture and education. We are descendants of Nikkei, and as such, we hope to establish a Nikkei solidarity organization, and that organization will be legally recognized soon. Through such activities, we hope to become the bridge between Japan and Cuba. My name is Issei Suwa. I am a sansei living in Tokyo. And I am Akemi Tamashiro. I am a yonsei, and my family was originally from Okinawa. And I would like to greet the Nikkei around the world. I am Keiko Imamura of the Nikkei Association. I am a sansei. I am Mailivis Inoue, and I am from Pinar del Rio, and I am a yonsei. My great-grandfather was from Niigata Prefecture. I am Tadashi Nakano, and my ancestors were from Kumamoto.
皆さんおはようございます。 I am very happy to be with you all during our 62nd International Convention of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad. I am Ines Yamanouchi P. Malyari. I am a Nikkei Sansei and the President of Philippine Nikkei Jikai Rengokai. I am also the school president of Philippine Nikkei Jinkai International School that is actually celebrating its 30th anniversary this year, and Mindanao Kokusai Daigaku that is also celebrating its 20th anniversary in the year 2022. We are very excited because during this year, it seems that the pandemic is almost over and that we are now gradually shifting to the new normal. Before, we had our online classes here in our educational institutions, but now we already have our face-to-face classes back. The Nikkei here in the Philippines are also engaged into different activities in collaboration with the government officials of Japan and the Philippines, as well as the local community. We have different activities for the youth, especially our educational programs, our sports program, and program to preserve the history, heritage, and culture of Japan through our museum, the Philippine-Japan Historical Museum. I hope that we will be able to learn from each other during this year's international convention, and I also wish that we will be able to see each other face to face during our next international convention in Tokyo. Thank you very much. Minasang domo arigatou gozaimashita.
My name is Rodolfo Wada. I am 40 years ago. I am the Vice President of the Association for Japanese Culture and Social Assistance in São Paulo. And I am the President of the Association of Former Japanese Government Scholarship Students. I have been conducting volunteer activities for 21 years in the Nikkei community, and such activities have led to my personal and professional growth. For the future of the Nikkei community in Brazil depends largely on the participation of future generations of Nikkei and Brazilians of all nationalities. To that end, we need to understand what inspiration and sense of purpose we can give to the volunteers who wish to learn more about Japanese culture and values, and that is no doubt a great challenge to our community. The solution may be to establish a system within our organizations where young people can exercise leadership and create innovation while receiving support from experienced elders. At the same time, in our communities, in-person events are returning. And we have been able to meet face-to-face with people we had met online earlier. And we hope to enhance and improve what we had conventionally been doing, learning from our experiences of our online mode. I express my congratulations to the 62nd Convention for Nikkei and Japanese Overseas, and hope that this convention will be a wonderful occasion for all of you. Thank you very much.
Dear friends, the Peruvian Nikkei Association Youth Division, that is what I'm representing. It is very important to acknowledge the contribution of youth and promote their development. The youth are very important for the unity of the Peruvian Nikkei community. They bring fresh and innovative perspective that enriches our culture. In Peru, there are about 6 generations of Nikkei, and we are all very active. The Peruvian Nikkei Association is trying to strengthen comprehensive development of youth, and the youth wants to contribute to the development of the country where we were born in. And also, we are trying to promote the cultural values that we have inherited. And we are in coexistence with the multicultural Peruvian society. And I believe it is very important that we share the Peruvian Nikkei culture and values. And therefore, we want to deepen friendship and learn from each other through conventions like this. Please accept our very warm greetings and appreciation, and let us continue to strengthen the Nikkei community around the world.
Estimados amigos, reciban un cordial saludo de la Asociación Peruano-Japonesa a todas las comunidades Nikkei en el mundo. Para nosotros es muy grato participar de esta edición y también queremos invocar a seguir trabajando por el futuro de todas las comunidades Nikkei en el exterior para que fortalezcamos los lazos de amistad y ser un puente de integración entre el Perú y Japón. Felicitar también a la Asociación Kaigai Nikkei Inkyokai por la organización de esta convención. Muchas gracias, nos vemos pronto.
My name is Katsuyoshi Ukike, and on behalf of the Nikkei Association of Bolivia, I extend my greetings. And our message is not only to the Nikkei of Bolivia, but to the Nikkei around the world with whom we share strong ties and long to meet again face-to-face as soon as possible. Our bonds, ties, solidarity, and mutual assistance in most cases have brought about good results. With this in mind, towards a free, safe, and productive society, if we cross borders and act as a team, we can bring about great revolutionary change and innovations.
Hello, everyone. I am Makoto Mitsui from Paraguay. I am a Nikkei Sansei. I am currently president of the Paraguayan Nikkei Center and vice president of the Federation of Japanese and Nikkei Associations of Paraguay. The Paraguayan Nikkei Center is a member of the International Union of Nikkei Clubs and Institutions. Within that framework, international and national exchanges called the Phoenix are organized by the Union of Young Nikkei, bringing together various young Nikkei from all over Latin America. The Paraguayan Nikkei Center is also a member of the Pan American Nikkei Association, in which Copanis are organized in 2024. The 21st Copani Paraguay 2024 will be organized with the motto, Oñan di Pepa. Paraguay is a bilingual country with two official languages, Spanish and Guarani, and Oñan di Pepa is a word in Guarani that means all together. As the leader of the Nikkei Society, I have the commitment and responsibility to continue promoting and strengthening the friendship between the entities associated with the Federation and Nikkei institutions, as well as with the international Nikkei institutions, and further strengthen the bond of friendship with Japan through the exchange of culture between the two countries. The message I want to leave to all Nikkei in the world is that I really feel very proud to be Nikkei. We are not alone. We have many Nikkei brothers in the world that unites us. We have something in common that unites us, which is the essence of Japan. Together we can achieve a lot and learn a lot from each other. Nowadays, all over the world, there is a generational change of leaders. So I want to leave as a message to these young leaders that they should not be afraid to assume this responsibility. It is a responsibility that has unique experiences, and that we should continue to strengthen the bonds of friendship between our communities and with Japan.
This year, we received video messages from the younger generations of Nikkei who lead their communities in their respective countries. And I'm very pleased to hear about some of the good news, such as the return of in-person events. Thank you to all those who sent in video messages and to the Nikkei organizations. Next, we go on to the keynote speech. The theme of this year's convention is the sustainable development of Nikkei communities and Japan. That is the overriding theme. And regarding this theme, we would like to ask Mr. Masato Ninomiya, a lawyer and doctoral professor at the University of São Paulo, to give the keynote speech. Professor Ninomiya's bio can be seen on the website of our association. We ask you to use the Google form to submit questions for the keynote speaker by clicking the link in the chat box. We will take up the questions during the Q&A session that will follow. If you have comments and not questions, please continue writing them into the chat box. Professor Ninomiya, if you please. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I am Masato Ninomiya from São Paulo, Brazil. I am very pleased to have the opportunity to speak at the 62nd Convention of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad under the theme, The Sustainable Development of Nikkei Communities in Japan. And the title of my speech is The History of the Development of the Nikkei Community in Brazil and its Future. Today, we heard greetings from Crown Prince Akishino and the Crown Princess was also listening in online. And as you know, Brazil this year celebrates its 200th year since independence. And it became a republic in 1889, so that is already 133 years ago. And diplomatic relations between Japan and Brazil were established in 1895, which is already 127 years ago. And the first immigrant ship, Kasatomaru, arrived in Brazil in 1908, so that is 114 years ago. That is the timeline. And the Japanese immigrants to Brazil, there were about 190,000 before the war, before World War II, and about 50 or 60,000 after World War II, which is a total about 250,000. Before World War II, those who went before the war and after the war, they all went through various hardships, and particularly those who went before the war, they had planned to earn a certain amount of money by working on the coffee plantations and to return home to Japan with that money. That was their dream. Only a very few people intended to live on a permanent basis in Brazil. But over 3 or 5 years, only a few people were able to earn their target amount and return to Japan. They fell ill, or maybe they had children, or they were not able to save as much money as they had hoped for. And they went on to stay for a longer time, and then the war broke out, and they could not return home. That was what happened to the majority of the immigrants. In Brazil, in 1930, a politician called Getúlio Vargas pulled off a coup d'etat, and Brazil becomes nationalistic, and the politics becomes totalitarian. And they put a restriction, Brazil imposed restrictions on the number of foreign nationals entering, reduced them to 2% of what they had allowed in earlier. That was enshrined in the 1934 Constitution. Before that Constitution, about 20,000 Japanese came to Brazil every year, but between 1936 and 41, only 2,500 Japanese were allowed to enter Brazil per year. If Brazil had allowed in 20,000 Japanese people per year, probably the war could not have been averted, but about 100,000 Japanese would have been able to go into Brazil, and that would have reduced the number of Japanese people who died in World War II, and I find that very sad and disappointing. When the war started, Brazil, at the strong request of the United States, sided with the Allied powers, and Brazil severed diplomatic ties with Japan, Germany, and Italy. And later, Brazil declared war on Germany. And regarding Japan, the United States decided to build bases, U.S. bases in Brazil. So after Germany surrendered, on June the 6th, 1945, Brazil declared war on Japan. This is right before World War II ended for Japan. But at that time, Japan was in the midst of the battles in Okinawa. It was very preoccupied. So not many people in Japan knew or know that Brazil actually declared war on Japan. But as a result of that, many Japanese immigrants had to give up returning to Japan. And many people decided to live in Brazil permanently. And to become permanent residents of Brazil, let's look at what happened. And more than 30 years had passed since the first immigrants came to Brazil. At that point, the Japanese immigrants, they came to Brazil, but they had intended to return to Japan. So no matter what sort of wilderness they were making their living in spite of their struggle, they did not forget the education of their children. They always thought about educating children. And the educated Japanese migrants became teachers, and they established schools to educate children in Japanese, in the Japanese system, in the Japanese way. So Japanese education by Japanese people for Japanese children. So even if they were living in shabby huts, they built sturdy, good schools for the children. And in the museum where I was involved in, there was a photo of a Japanese school built in 1919. It was a very grand school, and that was only 11 years after the Kasatomaru immigrant ship came. So that was a landmark event for the Japanese community. So my point is, the Japanese immigrants placed a high emphasis on education. And the São Paulo state government came to know of the existence of such a building, of such Japanese schools. And what happened was that the authorities sent Brazilian teachers to these Japanese schools. So before people noticed, education in Japanese or Japanese-style education was being administered in parallel to Brazilian education. The year 1934, as I mentioned, was the year of the Constitution which restricted the number of immigrants into Brazil. And by coincidence, 1934 was also the year that the University of São Paulo, where I work, was established. And from very early days, there were national single-faculty universities already. There were universities for law, engineering, medicine, and agriculture. Then arose the need to train teachers to teach junior high school and high school. Therefore, a comprehensive university was established, merging 5 faculties with an emphasis on the Department of Education. So that was the University of São Paulo, founded in 1934. And the state of São Paulo at that time was very affluent because of the coffee revenue. So they were able to channel much resources into building the University of São Paulo. And the founding of Sao Paulo University was the 26th year after the first Japanese immigrants arrived, but already in every faculty there were at least one or two Nikkei names. This is very impressive because the Japanese immigrant families were extremely poor. Under such conditions, the eldest son or the eldest daughter stayed at home to help the parents with their work. And the second child onwards represented the families in going on to the school system, elementary school, junior high school, and then on to university. And this has a lot to do with the fact that in Brazil, in the public school system, education was completely free. And for people who were not financially blessed, who were poor, they would work during the day and they would be able to go to night school after work. That applied for junior high school, and university. And even if they were graduates of night school, they were not discriminated against. So if they went to night university, they were able to enter working society with, so to speak, valid passports. Both Japan and Brazil are countries which attach heavy emphasis on education. So education in these countries, needless to say, leads to climbing up the social ladder and an elevation of social status. And the Japanese immigrants, I would like to talk about their social activities. I did research on that. And in the colonies before the war, the activities were mainly focused around the Japanese immigrant associations. The associations celebrated the 4 grand Japanese national holidays. These celebrations, in particular, the Tenchosetsu, the Showa Emperor's birthday on April 29th, that was important. People take time off work and hold Gakugeikai talent shows, undokai sports events, or unseasonable bonodori festivals. That was the common practice. And there was a big move or a big event that involved all of the Nikkei community in Brazil. And this was experienced by all Nikkei and Japanese people who came to Brazil, is that people fall ill. And when they become ill, they need to see a doctor. And it was hard for the Japanese people to explain their illnesses and symptoms properly because their Portuguese was still insufficient. They could not explain in detail what sort of pain they had and so forth. So they wanted to see Japanese doctors. In 1934, in the medical school of University of Sao Paulo, there were at least two students, Hosoya Shizo and Ujihara Masaki, two people who in the future would become doctors. And what had happened before then was that there were so-called roaming doctors who went around the Japanese settlements or colonies and took care of sick people. Until 1930, such doctors like Dr. Takeda or Dr. Takaoka, those who went through Japanese universities and who had doctor's licenses from Japan, they were able to register as doctors in Brazil. But after that, during the Vargas regime, that became difficult. So Dr. Hosoya, after his graduation, he did a lot of work to try to construct the Santa Cruz Hospital. The Nikkei community at that time was still very poor, and they could not find funding. So what happened was that the then Consul General Uchiyama, through Koki Hirota, the Foreign Affairs Minister, asked the Imperial Household Minister to ask the Showa Emperor to make a donation to the Brazilian Nikkei community so that they can build a hospital. And that went well. And the emperor donated 50,000 yen, which was a lot of money in those days. And the fact that the emperor had made a donation, that acted as a great boost to the campaign to raise funds. And the fundraising gained a lot of momentum in the Nikkei community. And in 1939, on April 29th, the birthday of the emperor, the Santa Cruz Japanese Hospital was founded. Unfortunately, after World War II began, the hospital, together with other Japanese assets like the Nomura Farm and Toza Farm, were confiscated as enemy assets. These assets were returned to the Japanese after the war one by one, but the Santa Cruz Hospital, until 1990, remained controlled by by Brazilian doctors. It remained under Brazilian supervision, and it was only 30 years ago that the hospital was returned to the Nikkei community. After the peace treaty was signed, the embassy consulates reopened, and Japanese companies began to come to Japan. Japanese companies began to come to Brazil to do business. Economic activity became vibrant. Trading houses, manufacturers. For example, in the late 1950s, Toyota went into Brazil, Yahata Steel, and Ujiminato Seitetsu Steel, and Ishikawajima. These companies went into Brazil to do business. The Brazilian Nikkei community, by the 1950s, had produced a lot of university graduates, and Nikkei people began to advance into politics. In 1948, a person called Yoshige Tamori became a city assemblyman of São Paulo, and he went on to serve as a member of parliament and served many terms. Immigration from Japan resumed in 1952, and I left in 1953 Japan with my parents and arrived in January 1954 in São Paulo. I am a child of immigrants. The post-war Nikkei community, as I said, in January 1954, that was the 400th anniversary of the founding of São Paulo. And the Japanese Nikkei community decided to assist with that and formed a committee. And Japan built a Japan pavilion modeled after the Shugakuin Rikyu, or some say it was the Katsura Rikyu, but that building was donated to São Paulo, and it is still preserved in the Ibirapuera Park in São Paulo. And this 400th anniversary committee was dissolved, and it was reincorporated as the Brazil Association of Japanese Culture and Social Assistance. And with that, Japanese centers were established one by one across Brazil, and centered around these Japan centers, various activities took place. And in São Paulo, not only the Association of Japanese Culture and Social Assistance, there were other support groups, and there was also the Federation of the Kenjinkais, the associations of people of the same prefectural ethnicity.
And of course, these organizations carried out Bon Odori festivals and also served and taught about tea ceremonies, pottery, Japanese calligraphy. There were many events to spread the Japanese culture, as well as sports events. And sports events were held even before the war for baseball, sumo, judo, karate, aikido, and kendo. So there were many sports enjoyed by people. Swimming, golf, mallet golf, tennis also were popular. And through sports events, this actually spread to the non-Nikkei community, and judo was popular. There were many non-Nikkei champions born in judo. And so sports is something that united the Nikkei and Brazilian communities together. And Japanese language education. Before the war, many students wanted to study in Japan, and some did come back to Japan to acquire Japanese language capabilities. The Japanese language spoken at home was also very important. If the parents were Issei, then, of course, the conversation at home would be in Japanese. Therefore, the Nisei children will naturally acquire the Japanese language. But of course, if you want to learn proper Japanese, you had to go to a Japanese language school or to go to São Paulo University or other universities in Brazil where Japanese language is taught, so that you can brush up on your Japanese skills. But if your parents are Nisei, or if only one parent is Issei and the other is non-Nikkei, then of course the parents will be speaking not in Japanese but in Portuguese, which means that the Sansei children will find it difficult to acquire Japanese. But the Nisei parents, of course, are different from the Issei parents. They were economically better off, and maybe they don't speak Japanese, but they may speak English, French, or other languages. And by using these language skills, they were able to get jobs not at Japanese companies, but European companies with their headquarters in Brazil, and also had jobs at Brazilian companies. Now, students who wanted to study in Japan, including myself, I, from a young age, wanted to study in Japan. And so 50 years ago, in 1972, I was able to come to Japan to study. Back then, the government-sponsored students, there were only about 15. Today, government-sponsored students would be about 50 or so. So the government-sponsored students became a very strong bond between the two countries. You also have the JICA training or the Nippon Foundation scholarship, including all those. These students created a very strong bond between the two countries. I believe there were about 200 or so students that could travel to Japan in a year. And then we faced a turning point. But before talking about that, I would like to talk about another activity within the Nikkei community, the Kenjinkai activities. They have visitors from Japan, the visitors from the prefectural assembly. Usually, the chairman of the prefectural assembly would come along with the governor. Just a while ago, the Ibaraki Kenjinkai celebrated their 60th anniversary, and we had Governor Oigawa, as well as Mr. Izawa, who is the chair of the prefectural assembly, came to Brazil. So there are 47 prefectural associations, Kenjinkai, and about Of course, because the prefectural governments sponsored several students, upon their visits, we have very active exchanges. And about 20 years ago, the Federation of Kenjinkai started this Japan Festival, where Japanese cuisine and also local products from Japan were sold. And about 200,000 people or so would come. And of course, it's not just the Nikkei people, but non-Nikkei people would also come to these festivals. So among the 47 Kenjinkai, the heads of the Kenjinkai are no longer Issei, but about 37 Kenjinkai has Nisei as their chair. The Ibaraki Kenjinkai also has a female chairperson to lead their association. And to spread the Japanese culture, one part of it was spreading Japanese cuisine. 50 years ago, when I was a student in Brazil, among the non-Nikkei people, there weren't many who ate sashimi or sushi. But nowadays, non-Nikkei people also like sushi, sashimi, tempura, and also ramen noodles. That's also considered as part of the Japanese culture that is quite popular among Brazilian people. Now, going back to the big turning point, the start of immigration from Japan with Kasatomaru, and then the war. These were the two big turning points. And the third one is in 1990. It's the Dekasegi, or the migrant workers movement. Well, I said it started in 1990, but that's because in June of 1990, the immigration law in Japan was revised, but actually this movement started 4 or 5 years before this. Many people came to Japan to work, for example, using the Minister of Justice's special visa. And the Nisei and Sansei people were able to come to Japan with these visas, and there was this big wave of people coming into Japan. In the second half of the 1990, there were about 30 to 40,000 people, and in 1991, there was a record 84,000 Nikkei Brazilians coming over to Japan to work, and among them, 61,000. The visas for these people were issued by the Consulate General in Sao Paulo. And of course, the Consulate General here will be covering Minas Triangle as well as Mato Grosso do Sul and Mato Grosso, which has a large Nikkei population. So from Sao Paulo, 61,000 visas were issued. And the staff at the Consulate General was overworked and collapsed, they say. Now, the mass media took up this movement as the Dekasegi phenomena. The word Dekasegi in Japanese doesn't have a good connotation. So I have said that let's stop using this word. However, the Brazilians that went to Japan called themselves Dekasegi workers. And today, a Portuguese dictionary here in Brazil carries the word Dekasegi as meaning the people who go to Japan to work. So it has been incorporated into the Portuguese language here in Brazil. Now, these Dekasegi migrant workers movement continued smoothly until the end of 2007. As I said, many people went to Japan, reaching about 320,000 people at one time. But with the Lehman shock after that, many returned to Brazil But once again, we see an increase of Dekaseki workers, and right now there are about 200,000 Brazilian Japanese working in Japan. Some have acquired permanent residence in Japan, and some even gained Japanese nationality. Now, since 2008, the number of Brazilian Japanese dropped in Japan, and the work that was carried out by the Brazilian Japanese were taken over by immigrants from Asian countries. There were some technical training interns as well as other migrant workers. Right now, from Vietnam, 450,000 people are working in Japan, from China, from the Philippines also. So Brazil is now ranked 5th in terms of migrant workers. Of course, we are not competing in numbers, but I'm just stating the status quo. So there were many different issues. In the first 10 years or so, there were problems of harmonizing with the local community or crime issues, also bullying at school for the children, sometimes leading to truancy. But these problems were overcome gradually. And one thing that gives us hope is that according to a certain survey, several hundred people, or maybe nearly 1,000 Brazilian Japanese living in Japan, are studying at Japanese universities or have graduated universities. Of course, Japan and Brazil both place importance on academic achievements. So graduating universities means that Brazilian Japanese can also gain jobs in Japan. And some have gained qualifications as lawyers. There are already 2 Brazilian Japanese with qualification as lawyers in Japan. And they are Brazilian nationals, but also there is one person who passed the medical exam in Japan. So, of course, these qualifications may be very difficult for even Japanese nationals, but there are Brazilian Japanese that have acquired this, which means that this is very encouraging when we think about the future of the Nikkei society in Japan. But in Japan, if you just graduate from junior high school, it's very difficult to work as you attend night high school, because night high school will start at around 5 and the classes will end at around 9. Of course, you need to have the understanding of your employers in order to go to a night school. So, including Brazilian Japanese, there are about 260,000 Nikkei people living in Japan, some with permanent residence and some who have acquired Japanese nationality. And some are no longer working as unskilled workers. Some have started their own businesses and they are managing small and medium-sized companies. Now, the Brazilian Japanese working in Japan, their strength would be language, because, of course, they will speak Portuguese, that's their mother tongue, and many people will speak English, and some are teaching English in Japan. So by having such people in the Japanese community, this is contributing to internationalization of the Japanese community and also contributing to coexistence of multiple cultures in Japan. But some have graduated Japanese junior high school and high schools and came back to Brazil for university education. there is a Shoei scholarship, which was provided by Japanese companies that already left Brazil. But every year or every month, a minimum wage, 1 month's worth minimum wage will be paid to these scholarship students and the young people who graduated from Brazilian universities, as well as the Brazilian Japanese who graduated from Japanese universities. They bring along their skills of Japanese language and knowledge of the Japanese community. And for the Brazilian Nikkei community, they are a great power. They are a great contribution. So when the Dekasegi phenomenon happened, that's exactly what we hoped for. We wanted people to bring back their experience of living in Japan so that the Nikkei community in Brazil could be revitalized and also bind stronger the two countries, because these people will speak Japanese as well as Portuguese. They may also speak other languages. And so it is quite encouraging and to see these people. Now, also in Brazil, the Nisei are becoming older. The Sansei people are in their prime of their life, and they are working hard out there in society. And the Yonsei, the fourth generation, is now becoming adults. But according to the immigration law in Japan, the Yonsei people, of course, if they are accompanied by their Sansei parents, they can come to Japan. However, once they exit Japan, because they are Yonsei, they will not be able to return back into Japan. But because of the late Prime Minister Abe Shinzo, he had understanding and cared for the Yonsei and allowed 4,000 Yonsei people a year to return to Japan. This doesn't just mean Brazilians, but also other immigrants as well. But after 4 years, 4,000 a year means that 160,000 people should have entered Japan, but actually only 141 have entered Japan. So we are asking for an improvement of these conditions. And with the efforts of many people, this Yonsei issue is being reviewed right now. And there were many efforts being made to revitalize the Nikkei community, which was a big challenge. But of course, we are Nikkei. We have our bond with Japan. We also have people being educated in Japan, and we hope that we can continue on this path. So what we are trying right now is to improve the conditions for acceptance of Yonsei people in Japan so that the Yonsei people can come to Japan and gain knowledge and experience. But there are many limitations, like they can't bring along their families, or there's this age limit of up to 35 years old. So we are hoping that with the effort and cooperation, as well as the understanding of the Japanese government, we can revise and change these regulations. The people from Brazil who came to Japan, 200,000 people, and those who came back from Japan to Brazil, I'm not really sure about the number, maybe 400 to 500,000, or maybe 600 to 700,000 Brazilian Nikkei people over the past 30 years have traveled between Japan and Brazil. And centered around these people, and also the activities of the Nikkei community, the activities of the Kenjinkai Federation or the Cultural Association and others, we have to work together so that we can further develop the Nikkei community and also strengthen the bond between Brazil and Japan. And with that, I would like to end my keynote speech. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Professor Ninomiya, thank you very much. Now we would like to go on to the Q&A. Today, Professor Ninomiya is participating online from Brazil. Can you hear us, Professor Ninomiya? Yes, we can hear you. And the facilitator will read out the questions, and we ask Professor Ninomiya to answer them. Due to the time constraint, please understand that we may not be able to cover all of the questions. So we begin with the first question. This is about the Nikkei associations, about the membership and its relations with non-Nikkeis. The question is, to increase membership, some say that non-Nikkei should be allowed into Nikkei associations. What is your view? From early on, we had that in mind. But in the early days, we allowed in only Nikkeis or non-Nikkeis who are married to Nikkeis. There were, in the early days, many organizations had those rules until about 40 years ago. But now, it is no longer unusual for Nikkeis to be married to non-Nikkeis, and it is not unusual anymore for non-Nikkeis to be participating in Nikkei organizations. So I understand the essence of your question, but I must say that this year, Nikkei, at this point in time, Nikkeis are completely incorporated into Brazilian society, and there is acceptance in the Nikkei organizations. There's no need to worry about that. We go on to the next question.
The Nikkei Brazilian society, I believe there is a generational change, and there are many non-Nikkei people marrying Nikkei people. The fifth and sixth generation Nikkei, what is their identity? Do they also have an Asian identity? Is that stronger? Or what kind of changes do you see among different generations? Well, compared to Sansei, Yonsei, right now, the youngest would be the sixth generation, Rokusei. They are more integrated in the Brazilian society, and the bond with Japan is becoming less and less. However, we want the Nikkei people, the Yonsei people, be able to go to Japan more freely for studying or for training purposes, because the number of people who can do that is very small. People being allowed to go to Japan to work under the current system, up to 5 years using the working holiday system, Yonsei people can go. But it's not just Yonsei, but in the future we want to have the Gosei, Rokusei, the fifth and sixth generation people being able to go to Japan to work and gain experience. Or unless we do that, they may be Nikkei, and of course there may be marriages with non-Nikkei people increasing, so their names already do not have Japanese names anymore. And their facial features may also become different from the Asian features that we see. That may fade away, but we want to make sure that the Nikkei people have strong ties with Japan, and therefore, be it manga or anime or wearing costumes of Japanese anime, we just want the young people to continue to have cultural exchanges with Japan. And recently we see that the Japan House was built 4 or 5 years ago. which showcases modern Japanese culture, which is interesting for not just the Nikkei people, but also to the non-Nikkei people. So we want to utilize facilities like this in order to deepen and strengthen our bonds with Japan.
まさに今お話しいただいていた
And in Japanese culture, which you have talked about, we have a question about language, a similar question. For the continuation of Nikkei communities, how important is the Japanese language? Nikkei Sansei and Yonsei do not acquire the Japanese language as naturally as the first and second generations. So when that happens, they gradually move away from using Japanese. And to change this trend or to respond to this situation, how do you define the importance of Japanese? That is exactly correct. To know Japanese culture and to go and work in Japan and so forth, unless you can speak the Japanese language, you have a lot of difficulty. So it is a means or a tool, the Japanese language. Well, it can be an objective, but to acquire Japanese language as a means to that, it could be done through sports or through being interested in anime or any other form of traditional Japanese culture. If they can take an interest in Japan through any of these, that will be a good channel into language acquisition. And there are non-Nikkeis who learn Japanese practically completely on their own, but speak very proficient Japanese, and they even write Japanese. One of the lawyers in my law firm, that lawyer can speak in proficient Japanese with Japanese clients, and that lawyer is a non-Nikkei. So non-Nikkeis can make an effort and they can learn to speak the Japanese language. So if Nikkeis try, and if they have Japanese blood, if they are encouraged to acquire the Japanese language and take an interest in Japanese culture, it will become possible for them to speak the language. And all the Japanese Nikkei organizations are making efforts to this end. Thank you.
次は
Now, the next question is a bit different from the other questions. The Pan-American Nikkeijin Association, I believe, exists in America, but the people who are here in Japan, are there any supports for the Brazilian Japanese working here in Japan? I believe this question is about a framework that unites the Nikkei people around the world. Among the Brazilian people, Brazilian Japanese, I believe there is some form of organization being established. But among the Japanese Brazilians here in Japan, I don't think there is a nationwide organization. But Pan-American organization, this was established with the efforts of many people. This was for the horizontal connection among the Nikkei people. There were some people who were against this. They were for the connection between Japan and Nikkei people abroad, but when the Pan-American organization was established, there were people against this horizontal connection among the Nikkei people. But nowadays, there are not many people who are against this movement. It has become a great organization now. I have also visited them and spoken at some of their events, and also in the Philippines, Yamauchi-san in Asia. And also at these conventions, we have people from Indonesia or from Europe who may attend. So I believe that this convention, as well as the Association of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad, is a very important organization that brings together the Nikkei people around the world. Thank you very much.
いただきありがとうございます。
Thank you very much for answering these questions. Next, there's a question about the subject of aging. We have several questions in this area. What are the challenges and problems related to the aging of Nikkei, and are there any improvements that can be made? This is a very broad question. You can answer this pertaining to the aging of the Brazilian, Japanese in Japan, or Nikkeis in Brazil. This is a very important question. In the Nikkei community in Brazil, there are already nursing care facilities for elderly people, and that is been built and supported by the Medical and Welfare Association of Brazil, and there are care facilities for the elderly and facilities for children in particular conditions, and the House of Hope. And Nikkeis, as they age in Brazil, some were not necessarily in a good financial position. And there are already several organizations which take care of such people in need. And at the Santa Cruz Japanese Hospital, they provide medical services free of charge to Nikkei people in such care facilities. And starting from 1990, the people who went from Brazil to Japan, they have already been in Japan for nearly 30 years. And in 2008, in the Lehman Brothers crisis, about half of them came to Brazil. But there are still many Brazilian Japanese living in Japan. And the SIACHE, the organization which provides information to overseas Nikkei, we held a 30-year anniversary symposium. And at the symposium, the issue of the aging of Nikkei in Latin America and Latin Americans in Japan was taken up as a subject of the symposium. The largest problem is that when these people started working, they did not become subscribers to the healthcare funds and have no healthcare insurance. This is about the Brazilians in Japan. And later on, there was an agreement signed between the Brazilian and Japanese governments regarding pensions and healthcare. But for in those days, so if the Brazilian people did not claim their pensions at that time, it has become difficult for them to claim their pension payments down the road. So that is a challenge which still awaits us in the future, how to make sure that the pension systems are in place for the Brazilian Japanese workers in Japan. And we are still getting a lot of questions, but due to the time constraint, we only have time for one more.
これは
And this question is about the identity of Nikkei people. There are similar questions. There are several similar questions. So going forward, assimilation to the local community and also the identity as a Nikkei. Maybe a third identity, for example, identity as a Brazilian Japanese. Maybe this third identity should be established, or do you think it is necessary? And if you believe that is necessary, how can culture and language be handed down? What are the necessary elements for establishing that third type of identity? I think depending on the background and country, the answer would be different. So if we can hear your personal opinion. Well, yes, the Nikkei history in each country is different, and that may change the answer to this question. Through the U.S. National Nikkei Museum, we were able to understand the hardship that the Nikkei people in the United States went through, the internment during the war, and also to overcome that, I believe many Nikkei made effort. So the United States was of course at war with Japan, and so it may have been very difficult. The U.S. Nikkei population were assimilated into the American community, and so that's quite different from the Brazilian Nikkei. People in Philippines and Indonesia, I do not know the situation of these people, but I believe in each country, in many cases, because of the war, Philippines, Indonesia, and other Asian countries, I believe the Nikkei people there had to go through hardships. And in Brazil, the Nikkei people in the United States, of course, went hardship because the Issei and Nisei people were all interned. But that didn't happen in Brazil. So in that sense, I believe we were happy or happier. But as the questioner is asking, a third identity, I wasn't really able to understand what that would mean. But so even if we have many more marriages among Nikkei and non-Nikkei people, and no matter how diluted the Japanese blood could be, if the person is aware that he or she is a Nikkei, I believe that awareness is necessary, because the Japanese culture is a very good culture that we could be proud of. And also the ethical values as a Nikkei, among the people who are researching the Nikkei history, have deep research on that. And that is the value that we want to cherish. For example, being polite to each other, and that could be learned through sports. And also the Nikkei immigrants, not just in Brazil, but I think it's common among people who went to any country. We persevere and we are honest. So these ethical values that were brought from Japan into each of the receiving countries, that is why we have been respected in the community of our residents. Also in Brazil, there are about 2 million people. Of course, there are some people who do bad things, but at least in Brazil, the Nikkei people initially were not involved in crimes and did not really trouble the police or the authorities. So these ethical values, which is unique to Japan, that is what we are trying to seek, as well as culture, language. I believe that if we are interested in that, we will be able to share the ethical values that was carried down through generations. Thank you very much for answering this very difficult question.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your cooperation. Once again, to all of you, thank you very much. With this, we conclude the opening ceremony of the 62nd Convention of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad. Tomorrow, starting from 10 a.m. Japan time, we will have 2 sessions of panel discussions under the theme for a sustainable Nikkei community, practices and outlooks. Like today, participants can join using the same Zoom URL. We look forward to your continued participation. See you again tomorrow.
それでは本日
With this, we sign off. Thank you very much once again for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.